This is Curtis Broderick in the Framework Group, and welcome to today's Framecast. Today we'll see how to create entry field constraints, otherwise known as coherence control. The idea is that we'll check to see if the user input for a variable is acceptable or not. We'll either allow the user's response to pass with or without a message concerning their response, or we'll not accept the user's response and block them from saving the record until their response meets specific criteria. You see in front of you a fictional visit form that I've created here, and I want to show you how I've been able to create coherence controls here. There are two methods to control what the user gives for a question's response. There's strict limits and there's coherence control statements. Let's start with the easiest, the strict limits. Now, strict limits are only valid for numbers and dates and is done in the Epiconcept editor. For this variable temperature, you can see that I've made a minimum and a maximum, 30 and 43. Now, these are strict limits that the user, if they type anything outside of these values, they won't be able to save their file there. They'll be forced to be within that range. So let's go back and take a look at that. And that was temperature, and I said 30 to 43. So if I wrote something like 28 and I go here, right off the bat I have a problem. It tells me that there is a problem with the minimal edge of these strict limits. If I go on the upper side of it, over 43, if I do 45 for example, I'll have the same problem. When I'm within that, and of course it forces me as well that I cannot save this record. No matter what I do, I cannot save it. So let's bring that down to something reasonable, like let's say 40, and if I go to the next field, it's gone. Okay, so those are the strict limits, and that's done in the editor on each variable. And again, it's only for numbers and for dates, a minimum and a maximum. Now, the second and more interesting way to limit incorrect data entry is with coherence control. If you go to your Administration tab, you should see coherence control as an option. If you don't, you can easily set that up by putting the following into the XML resource for the home page. This link right here. So let's go to coherence control. And you can see I've written quite a few different coherence controls, and I'd like to start with just a basic one. There's a field, if we look, a field called pulse at rest. That's an input field, and if I go back here, I have what's called pulse error, and I can open that up. This has already been written. I give a name to each of my coherence controls, and then I say in MySQL exactly what is the condition that will throw the message or not allow the person to continue. It's the name of the var set dot name of the variable. So if pulse is less than 40 or the pulse is greater than 100, the following message will be shown. Attention, the value given is out of range. Only values between 40 and 100 inclusive are allowed. Now after that, I have the level of the error. Now I could either say it's an error, which will mean it'll show in red, and they will not be able to save the record unless they change the value. That's why it says it's blocking. I could, however, click on avertissement, which means warning, and that will be in orange. It will let the user continue and save his record. That's not a problem, but it's just a warning so that he knows. We won't block them from that response. And then we have alert, which is blue, and note, which is green. And again, those will not block the user from saving his record. They're just a way to tell the person about the response. So let's go look back in here, and we look at the pulse, and if we say that was I think if I say that's 39 again here, and we have that message, attention, the given value is out of range. Notice this is a bit different than the strict limits. When we had the strict limits, it didn't give us any opportunity to say exactly what message we want to give. It just said that it didn't make it within the limits. I'll do that again. I'll go to here. And notice on that error, it just says error for the limits. Okay. Notice down below here we have a little area that gives us more specific details on the errors. And what we can do is we can, if you have multiple errors on a page, then you can go through each one, and when you click on the hyperlink here, it'll actually take you directly to that variable. Now on this page, since we just have a few variables, clicking on that just shows me the page. But if you had many variables, it would bring you directly to the variable in question. So notice again here, it's red, it's blocking, it will not let me save this record until I go within these values here. So let's put that to 60 and I'm fine. Notice again, here's another one that has a problem, and this one was merely because the response is obligatory. If we go back to the editor, you notice that this question has a little star there, which means it's mandatory, it's obligatory. You have to answer that. So that's, in a sense, coherence control. Now let's look at a coherence control on a dictionary variable. So here we have a dictionary variable, and I've set it up so that if the person clicks on unknown, there will be a message. It says, please call the patient to find out this information. It's very important. Now, being that it's in orange, it means it's just a warning so that I can still save the record if I need to, but it's warning me that I really should answer something more correctly, like 6 to 12, 3 to 6, for example. And of course, down below, we also see all the different levels of errors for this screen. Right now we only have one warning and no errors, no notes, and no alerts. I can of course click that and open that and see the same message and click on that item to go to it as before. Let me show you what that looks like because it's a little bit different. What we have to do is find out for a dictionary what the ID data is. Here's that dictionary, time meal. We'll open that up and we'll see our responses. Here we go. What I want to bring your attention to is the identifier, so that each dictionary item has an identifier, 395, 397, and what we have to do is we have to check for these items when we make the coherence control. So let's switch back over to the coherence control. We'll see that what we have to do is check that the value of the dictionary variable is equal to the dictionary identifier. In this case, 403 was the one where the person responded, I don't know. And then that's when we gave them the message, please call the patient to find out, it's very important. And we also had said it was just a warning, so that goes in orange and they can still save. So let me go back to that. I'll click there and I'll click on save, and notice we can still save anyways even though we did have that warning. Alright, now let's look at another type, a dictionary with checkboxes. I set it up so that if they happen to click these two items, which are opposites, so in this case it would be, I determined that this would be an error, that it comes up and says this is an error because they chose diarrhea and constipation, which are two opposites, and that's not right. So it gives me the message, this is not valid response. I can hide that. And I can click this here as well. It's the same thing. I see this is not a valid response. Unclick either diarrhea or constipation, so I'll unclick one and I'm fine. Notice it was in red, so that means that I cannot save this record until I get rid of that error. So let's take a look at how we did that. So we had two items and they could not both be checked at the same time. So here's the coherence control. I'll open it up. Now notice it's a bit different. We still use those identifier codes from each item, but this time, because it's a checkbox dictionary, we have to use the MySQL command in. So we say, is 383 in symptoms and 391 in symptoms? If that's true, then we'll show this message, this is not a valid response. Okay, so it's just a little bit different. With the regular dictionary we said equal to the identifier, the data ID, but in the case of checkbox dictionary items we say is the ID in symptoms. if we look here, there's another part down here. Most of the time you're going to check when you leave the field. That is, it will check your value the moment you leave that field and go to another field in the form. There is an option to actually have all the coherence controls done in a batch, and that's for another podcast. But you can do that so that if you have many records saved, say hundreds of thousands, and you'd like to in one sole batch go through all of them to see that all of them respect the coherence controls, it could be done there. I'd like to show you now how we can use two different variables to create a coherence control. What I've done in this case, I've taken this variable and I've combined it with this variable in a coherence control to say if the temperature is over 42 degrees and it's one of these three options, in other words they ate within the last 12 hours, then I want to trigger a message. So let's go here and type in something over 42 degrees, let's say 43 degrees, and notice it says attention, please see the on-call doctor immediately for this case. It's true if I click that one, it's true if I click that one, but in this case that's not true. It's in blue and it's an alert, and we can still save the record if we need to. Again, we see the message about changing one or the other for these two. So if we changed this, it goes away, or if we change this back down to, let's say, 41, then it should be fine. Alright, so there's no problem in using multiple variables to create a coherence control. Let's go look at that. Here it is. I'll open it up. And you can see that I have an OR condition for those three. For the meal time, it was either the item 395, 397, or 399. And if the temperature is greater than 41, okay, in fact it wasn't 42, it was greater than 41. And then my message, and it's in alert, and alert is blue. Okay, and finally I'd like to show you one more thing. What we can do is we can put multiple coherence controls on an individual variable. I might have it such that when you enter a specific value you'll get a red message where you can't continue, and if you add another value that is within range, it'll just show in orange. You can continue, but it's still a warning. So remember how I had the coherence control that if I hit these two, diarrhea, constipation, I would get an error. Now I can't continue. I have to fix this first. If I were to click headache as well, there is another coherence control in that. That's green. It's just a note. It's just saying now we use only ibuprofen and paracetamol. Okay, so if I fix that by taking away diarrhea, notice it's in green. It's just giving me a message, but that's fine. I can save anyways. Just to show you that we can actually have two types of coherence controls at once. We have both an error and we have a note, and you can put as many on a single variable as needed. So there you go. That's coherence control. We have strict limits. If you remember, we did that with temperature, and that's done in the editor where you put strict limits, and that's only for numbers and for the dates. And then we have the coherence controls, which are created line for each variable. We can use multiple variables in a coherence control, and we can put multiple coherence controls on single variables. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. And we'll see you next time.